In the eastern Aegean Sea, where the waters glistened like melted glass and olive trees grew twisted by time and wind, there lay the island of Kos, a place of sun-warmed marble and whispering pines. It was a quiet land dotted with vineyards, low stone houses, and temples where priests chanted in the golden light of morning. Among these hills and groves, far from the clang of city life and the ambitions of men, lived a physician named Hippocrates. He was neither a god nor a magician, nor did he pretend to be. His robes were simple linen, his sandals worn by years of walking. His beard was long and streaked with gray, his hands callous but gentle. Yet there was something in his eyes, a calm and understanding that made even restless minds grow quiet. Each day, long before the sun rose over the horizon, Hippocrates would wake to the cooing of doves and the rustle of leaves in the sea breeze. His home, built from pale stone and shaded by fig trees, stood near a sacred grove where thyme and myrtle scented the air. There, he lived not only to heal the sick but to understand the balance of life, of body and spirit, of man and nature. This morning was no different. Hippocrates stirred before the light touched the sky. He stretched slowly, breathed deeply, and stepped outside. The coolness of dawn embraced him as the stars slowly faded above. The air smelled faintly of salt and mint. He made tea from dried herbs, melissa, chamomile, a hint of laurel, and sat on a low stone bench, watching the color of the sky shift from deep violet to amber. The first part of his day was always spent walking, not in haste, but in observation. He would walk through the orchards, past the old healing temple dedicated to Asclepius, and down to the quiet stream where reeds swayed like dancers and frogs chirped sleepily from the banks. He watched how the goats behaved that morning, whether they were restless or still, how the birds flew, if the air held moisture or dryness. He believed that nature always spoke first, before the body did. That healing came from listening. Later that morning, a young boy named Ariston arrived with his mother. The boy had been feverish for days. His eyes were sunken, and he trembled slightly even in the warm light of morning. Hippocrates invited them into the shaded portico of his home, where ivy curled along the columns and bees hummed lazily among the lavender. He knelt before the child, not as a master, but as a student. "Tell me," he said softly, placing 2 fingers on the boy's wrist, "what do the days feel like for you?" The boy blinked, eyes glassy. "They feel too long, and I hear a hum in my head, even when it's quiet." Hippocrates nodded slowly. "And what of your sleep?" "Like waves," the boy murmured. "They come and go, but I never ride them far." The healer smiled gently and whispered something that only the boy could hear. The child smiled faintly in return, the first in many days, his mother later said. For Hippocrates, treatment was not a prescription. It was a process. He boiled water with wild fennel and marjoram, instructed the boy to rest where the air flowed gently, and sang a low, wordless chant from the mountains. "Not magic," he said, "just rhythm." The body loved rhythm. It remembered its own balance when it heard the right pulse again. As the day passed, more came. An old fisherman with aching joints, a weaver troubled by sudden dizziness, a shepherd who could no longer dream. To each, Hippocrates offered not quick relief but quiet observation. He sat with them, under trees and beside the old marble fountain, and asked them not only what hurt but how they lived, what they ate, what they feared, what gave them joy. By afternoon, the winds turned, and the sea grew a little more restless. The healer sat beneath his olive tree, writing in a scroll made from fine Egyptian reed. He recorded the day's encounters, not just symptoms, but stories. The boy who dreamed in waves, the fisherman whose knees knew when rain would come, the woman who stopped breathing fully after losing a child many springs ago. He believed the body was more than flesh. It was a garden, each one different. And healing, he said, was not about conquering illness, but about tending to the garden so it could remember how to grow again. As evening descended and the sky blushed in oranges and purples, Hippocrates lit a single lamp. Its flame flickered against the stone walls, casting long, soft shadows. He prepared a simple meal, barley stew with lentils and crushed garlic, and a fig split in half, drizzled with honey. He ate slowly, savoring the warmth, the peace, the return of night. Outside, the cicadas began their lullaby. The moon, pale and low, rose gently over the hills. The healer closed his eyes, listening to the night. The wind moved softly through the leaves. Somewhere, an owl called once, then was silent. He thought of all he had seen that day, not just illness, but the fragility of life, the beauty of care, and the endless patience of the world. And as he lay on his straw bed, the earth cradling him beneath the roof of stars, Hippocrates whispered a final thought. To know the body is to know the earth, and to listen, truly listen, is to heal. He fell asleep to the rhythm of the sea, slow and eternal, like breath. Morning on the island of Kos began with a hush. The sun had not yet risen, but the world stirred gently, not with urgency, but with grace. Olive branches swayed as though stretching, and the marble paths remained cool underfoot. A soft mist curled around the low hills, catching the first breath of daylight. Inside his modest home, Hippocrates rose from his bed of woven straw. He had slept soundly, though the whispers of a dream lingered still, a dream of white-robed men arguing beneath the painted dome of a great hall, their voices echoing not with anger, but with longing for truth. He dressed slowly, as was his habit, allowing each motion to ground him. His robe was the same simple cloth he had worn for years. It smelled faintly of laurel and thyme. He fastened a leather belt around his waist and tied back his silvering hair. Then he poured a cup of water from a clay vessel and stepped outside. The air was cool, with the promise of warmth. Far away, the sea hummed like a distant drum. The birds began their morning songs, not in chorus, but one by one, each note a quiet invitation to wake. Hippocrates walked his familiar path through the grove. The stones remembered his feet. The trees, shaped by decades of wind, seemed to bow as he passed. His thoughts, like the morning itself, moved slowly and without urgency. He was not a young man. His hands bore the lines of time, and his back ached slightly more with each season. But his mind was more open now than ever before. He no longer sought answers as a warrior seeks conquest, but as a gardener seeks light. As he approached the base of Mount Dikaeos, a boy waited for him, a temple scribe named Melanthios. Barefoot, with curly hair and eyes full of purpose. "Master Hippocrates," the boy said, bowing, "the high priests have summoned you to the hall of Asterion. They request your wisdom at midday." The physician inclined his head. "And what is the nature of this gathering?" "There is debate," said the boy, "about the origins of disease. Whether illness is born of divine punishment, or if it is, as you say, a matter of imbalance in the body." Hippocrates smiled faintly. "A debate worth having, then." He accepted the invitation not with eagerness, but with curiosity, not to prove, but to understand. The hall of Asterion stood near the heart of Kos, beside a sacred spring and a thicket of bay laurels. It was an ancient structure, its columns carved with scenes of healing gods and heroic cures. Inside, the marble floor gleamed like still water, and voices echoed softly, as if reluctant to break the peace of the place. By the time Hippocrates arrived, robed priests had already gathered. They wore white and gold, and their sandals clicked against stone. Incense drifted through the air, not harsh, but woody and grounding. At the center stood a raised platform where the high priest, Archon Theosides, waited. His beard was immaculate, his eyes clear, but his expression betrayed caution. "We welcome the healer of Kos," he intoned, raising his hand. "Let this hall be a place of reason and reverence." Hippocrates bowed slightly, then took his seat near a column, beneath the painted image of Asclepius holding his serpent staff. Theosides began. "For centuries, we have understood illness as a message, a divine sign of moral imbalance. The gods speak through fever, through fits, through withering of limb. When man forgets the sacred laws, the gods remind him, through the body." Murmurs of agreement passed through the hall. This was the way of things. The old way. The accepted way. But then another voice rose, gentle, aged, and calm. "If the gods speak through the body," said Hippocrates, "should we not listen carefully to what the body says, not just what we fear it to mean?" Eyes turned toward him. Some in curiosity, some in caution. "I have sat beside the sick for many seasons," he continued. "I have held the hands of those with trembling limbs and listened to their hearts beat like frightened birds. I have watched fevers rise with the winds and fall with the cooling of night. I have seen healers punish the patient with ritual, and the illness remain." He paused. The silence was not tense, but thoughtful. "I have found," he said slowly, "that sickness is not a punishment, but a sign of imbalance. The body, like the earth, seeks harmony. When too much heat or moisture, too little rest or nourishment, too much grief or solitude, the body remembers. It speaks in aches, in sleeplessness, in swellings and shivers. And it asks, through suffering, to be brought back to balance." The hall was still. A younger priest stood. "But what of the epileptic, whom the gods strike with sacred seizure? What of madness, which possesses without cause?" "I have seen the same man," said Hippocrates gently. seized in vision after eating moldy barley. And I have seen madness pass like a storm, only to return each time the moon is full. These are not punishments. They are patterns. They are cycles. They are part of nature, not above it. The priest murmured. Another asked, "If illness is not punishment, is healing not grace?" "Healing," said Hippocrates, "is remembering. The body remembers health, just as a field remembers spring after a harsh winter. Our task as healers is not to command, but to guide, to nourish the soil of the self until life returns." He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply spoke, as one speaks beside a fire, in the long dark hours before dawn. He spoke of patients who improved not through sacrifice, but through clean water, warm rest, and herbal teas brewed from mint and valerian. He spoke of the mind, and how sadness could make the stomach sour, and fear could quicken the breath until the chest tightened like a closing door. And when he finished, he simply folded his hands and bowed his head. There was no applause, no verdict. But something in the room had shifted, not shattered but softened. After the gathering dispersed, one of the younger priests approached him in the courtyard. A quiet man named Demetrios. "My brother," he said, "has had waking dreams since childhood. We called it divine madness. We offered prayers, but nothing changed. Could you see him?" Hippocrates placed a hand on the priest's shoulder. "I will sit with him. I will listen, and perhaps together we will understand more." That evening, Hippocrates returned to his grove. The sky was a soft violet, and the world was slow and golden. He brewed a tea of lavender and rosehips, and sat beneath his favorite olive tree, watching the stars wake. He did not consider the day victorious. He did not seek to triumph. But he felt peace, the peace of a stone set gently in its place in a long, winding mosaic. He opened his scroll and wrote, "Let us not fear the body, nor blame the gods. Let us instead learn its rhythms, its seasons, its silence. For in understanding there is healing, and in patience there is peace." The wind whispered through the leaves, and the healer slept. As the golden hues of late afternoon stretched across the whitewashed walls of Kos, the air thickened with the scent of sun-warmed thyme and the distant salt of the sea. The breeze that gently rustled the leaves of the cypress trees brought with it the hum of bees, the clink of amphorae, and the quiet murmur of conversations drifting from the marketplace far below. Hippocrates, now in his mid-30s, had grown into the role of healer not only in skill but in demeanor. His gaze had softened with time, carrying the patience of many seasons and the humility born of listening to both nature and people. His reputation had slowly woven itself into the fabric of the region, his name whispered in reverence not as a miracle worker, but as a man who truly saw others. This day found him walking the meandering path toward the old sanctuary nestled at the base of Mount Dickios, where sick villagers sometimes gathered in hope of comfort rather than cure. It was a humble space, no grand columns or marble statues, just a clearing with stone benches and the scent of cedar wood lingering in the air. As he approached, he saw a figure he recognized. Elder Philin, his former tutor, sat hunched upon a rock, sunlight catching the silver strands of his hair. His once booming voice had thinned over the years, yet his eyes still held that lively glint of curiosity. "You walk like a man carrying silence, Hippocrates," the elder greeted without rising. Hippocrates smiled and sat beside him. "Silence has a voice of its own, and I find it teaches better than noise ever has." They sat for a long moment without speaking, letting the wind and the cicadas speak in their place. It was a habit they had formed many years before, pausing to observe the world before speaking of it. Eventually, Philin stirred. "You know, I've been thinking about breath." Hippocrates chuckled. "A worthy thought, for it is the beginning and end of all things." "Indeed. I used to think breath was a thing of the lungs only. But the older I get, the more I think breath lives in the soul." The younger man nodded slowly, the statement settling over him like morning mist. "And when one's breath grows shallow, it is not always the lungs that fail, but the soul that forgets how to expand." Philin smiled wistfully. "Still the poet, I see." Their conversation turned, as it often did, to the nature of life and balance. Hippocrates shared his recent thoughts on diet, exercise, and emotional health, and how he believed all were deeply connected. Philin listened, adding quiet questions, allowing his pupil to unfold ideas like the petals of a flower. As dusk approached, villagers trickled in. Among them was a mother with her son, no more than 10 years old, whose cheeks were flushed and whose limbs moved with the stiffness of fever. She knelt before Hippocrates with trembling hands. "There is no coin to offer, master, but his cries haunt my nights." Hippocrates reached out gently, resting his hand upon the boy's forehead. It was warm, but not burning. The illness was not dire, but it lingered. With soft words, he asked questions, not just of symptoms, but of the child's sleep, his laughter, his worries. The mother seemed confused at first, but soon her answers painted a picture. The boy had not played in weeks, not smiled since his father had departed for sea. "Then it is not just his body that needs tending," Hippocrates said quietly, "but his joy." He instructed the mother in simple herbs for calming the fever, and gave her a handful of dried chamomile and honey bark. But more than that, he whispered stories into the boy's ear, tales of dolphins who guided ships and turtles who carried prayers in their shells. The boy's eyes lit faintly. That night, under a blanket of stars and silence, Hippocrates did not return to the town. Instead, he slept beneath the cypress trees, listening to the world breathe. The gentle pulse of the earth lulled him, and in his dreams he walked beside rivers of thought, guided by voices not his own but old and deep. Voices of healers long past. They did not give him answers, but offered questions like seeds. When dawn broke and sunlight spilled across the glade, Hippocrates rose with a sense of direction unspoken. He would not only treat those who came to him, he would teach others to see what he had seen. Not just herbs and humors, but harmony. He would build a place, not a temple, but a garden of knowledge. And in the days that followed, the first stones were laid for what would one day be called the Asclepion. Not grand at first. A circle of benches, a shelf of scrolls, a tree planted where students would sit and listen, not to lectures, but to life itself. Hippocrates believed healing came from within, from the patient, from the earth, from the delicate balance between breath and thought. And he was content to walk slowly, letting the future find him not through fame, but through the quiet ripple of wisdom passed on. The cicadas hummed louder with the rising sun. Another day began in ancient Kos, gentle, reflective, and full of life. The sun climbed gently over the eastern horizon, scattering soft, honey-colored light across the slopes of Mount Dickyos. Down below, the narrow paths of Kos were still cool, dusted with the quiet of early morning, when most souls were just beginning to stir from dreams. But at the edge of a quiet glade, just past the low stone walls and the fragrant thickets of sage and laurel, a man stood already awake, brush in hand, tracing simple lines in the soil. Hippocrates, clad in his plain linen tunic, moved with calm purpose, sketching a circle that would become something more than geometry. He was designing space, space for breath, space for wonder, space for stillness. The Asclepiad had begun, not as a structure, but as an idea planted carefully in fertile ground. There were no columns yet, no tiled roofs or ivory benches. There was only the grove, the earth, and the man who believed healing could be taught not through strict command, but through silence, story, and shared presence. Each morning, Hippocrates welcomed the sun with a slow walk through the olive trees, noting how the breeze shifted through their silver leaves. He studied the birds, how their rhythms changed with the seasons. He watched bees gather from wild thyme, and how the scent of citrus blossoms faded after noon. Nature, he believed, was the first and greatest teacher. And so the first students of the Asclepiad were not young men from Athens or wealthy sons of merchants, but villagers, farmers with cracked hands, fishermen who limped from years at sea, midwives who knew the cries of labor better than any scroll could explain. They came not seeking titles, but understanding. Hippocrates would greet them simply, offering olives or warm water with fig leaves. He never stood above them, never lectured from a platform. Instead, he sat in the shade beside them and asked questions. What does the body feel when fear enters? Why do wounds fester more in angered hearts than in calm ones? How does the wind change the pulse of a man who sleeps beneath it? At first, many were confused by his ways. They expected charts, instructions, measurements. But soon they began to listen differently, to listen to the sounds beneath words, the stories inside symptoms, the breathe between breaths. One afternoon, a boy named Lysandros arrived. He was only 15, with dark, curious eyes and hands that trembled from excitement rather than illness. His father, a shipwright, had died at sea the previous winter, and since then the boy had wandered, seeking something that would give shape to the emptiness he carried. Hippocrates saw the boy's hunger for meaning. He welcomed him not as a student, but as a friend. "Come," he said, "let us listen to the body speak." He gave Lysandros no books, but rather simple tasks: gathering fresh water, watching birds, listening to the breathing of an old hound as it slept beneath the fig tree. Days turned to weeks, and slowly Lysandros began to understand. He could feel the tension in a farmer's shoulder before the farmer himself noticed. He sensed when a mother's silence held more pain than her tears. He learned to smell the difference between a fever born of infection and one born of grief. One twilight the boy asked, "Master, why do you teach with riddles and roots when others teach with tablets and theories?" Hippocrates looked at him with gentle eyes and replied, "Because a healer's touch must not come only from the mind, but from the whole being. A chart can tell you where the heart lies, but only stillness can teach you how it hurts." That night they sat in the small circle of the grove, joined by a few others. The stars bloomed above them, and the trees rustled like gentle voices. Hippocrates shared stories, not of gods or myths, but of small lives. A fisherman who cured his shaking by sleeping in his boat beneath the moon. A girl who found her appetite only when music returned to her home. A widow who walked each morning to the sea, whispering her husband's name to the waves until her lungs softened again. Healing, he taught them, was not always a cure. It was not always the mending of bone or the banishment of fever. Often it was the return of a person to themselves. In time, word spread. More came to learn. A potter from Nisyros, a weaver from Rhodes, even a skeptical physician from the mainland, who stayed only 3 days but left without complaint, silent and thoughtful. The Asclepian grew, not in grandiosity, but in rootedness. They built no walls that blocked the wind, no doors that kept out songbirds. Every part of it breathed with the world around it. They added benches carved from cypress, simple shelves for herbs, a pool fed by mountain spring, where patients could sit and soak their weariness away. And always at the center was the grove. The grove listened. Years passed in soft cycles. Hippocrates aged slowly, his hair turning silver like the olive leaves he loved. Yet his steps remained steady, his voice clear, his heart spacious. He never claimed mastery, only shared what he had noticed, what he had wondered. One evening, as he sat alone beneath the now towering fig tree, Lysandros returned, not as a boy, but as a man. His shoulders were broad, his hair long, and his eyes carried the calm of one who had walked many paths. "I have healed no kings," he said softly, "but I have watched a child sleep through pain, and I have seen a man forgive his son." Hippocrates nodded. "Then you have done well." They sat together in silence, the stars above echoing the quiet majesty of their lives. And as the night deepened, the Asclepian glowed with small lanterns, lights of learning, of listening, of love. The island of Kos, kissed by the Aegean and cradled in olive groves, basked in the warmth of early autumn. The cicadas had fallen quiet, and the sea breeze carried the gentlest whisper of change, not urgent, not sharp, but slow and inevitable, like the tide that always returns to kiss the sand. Hippocrates walked the familiar footpaths that led from his modest home to the outer hills. With sandals softened by years of walking and a staff worn smooth by time, he looked not unlike one of the ancient trees he so loved, weathered, rooted, and wise. The path wound between fig trees, dry stone walls, and fields now golden with drying herbs. Every leaf, every scent, every sound along the trail seemed to greet him by name. Today, He did not walk in search of herbs or patience, but to simply be, to breathe with the earth and listen to the quiet stories of the wind. He reached a small ridge overlooking the sea, where the land dropped steeply into a mosaic of vineyards and olive terraces. Below, in the soft haze of midday light, the rooftops of the town shimmered gently. Children's voices echoed from far away. Somewhere, a goat bleated lazily. Hippocrates settled beneath an almond tree, its twisted limbs shading him like the arms of a dear friend. He let his thoughts drift unhurried. There was no scroll to be read today, no lesson to be taught, only the wind and the wisdom it carried. It was here that he was often joined by his younger student, Leontios, a bright-eyed boy barely into manhood, whose hunger for knowledge burned fiercely but kindly. Today, as if summoned by thought alone, Leontios appeared over the ridge, carrying a small bundle wrapped in linen. "I brought you something," he said, lowering himself to sit cross-legged beside his teacher. Hippocrates smiled. "If it is the bread from your mother's hearth, I shall be in your debt." Leontios grinned and unwrapped the cloth, revealing warm barley bread and a few olives. The two ate quietly, the sound of their chewing softened by the rustling leaves. "Master," said Leontios after a time, "may I ask you something?" "You always may," Hippocrates replied. "Do you believe that the soul is like the wind? That it moves through us unseen but real?" Hippocrates looked out over the sea, where the wind curled silver across the surface. "There are many who say the soul is a flame," he said slowly. "Others that it is a breath or a song. I believe the soul is what makes us reach for kindness even when none is watching. It is what pauses us before harm, what stirs us to heal. But it is not a thing we can hold." "No," Hippocrates said, placing his palm gently on the earth. "Nor is the soil, though it nourishes us. Nor the sea, though it carries us. Not all truths must be held to be known." They fell into another silence, more comfortable than the first. The almond tree creaked above them, its leaves whispering ancient secrets. "You are quieter than usual," said Hippocrates after some time. "I've been thinking of my father," Leontios admitted. "Of how he died. The fever came so fast. You could not save him. I remember. I thought, when I began learning from you, that I would find the answer, the herb, the mixture, the technique, that would have changed what happened. And now I am not sure the answer lies in a plant or a potion. I think it might lie here." Leontios touched his chest, just over his heart. "In how we live, even when we know the end will come." Hippocrates said nothing for a long while. Then he reached out and gently touched the young man's shoulder. "Then you have already learned more than many who have studied for decades." A bird called from a nearby cypress, its cry lonely but not sad. It was as if even the creatures of the hills had heard the boy's revelation. Below in the town, the shadows began to lengthen. The marketplace would be quieting. Fires would be kindled. And on the island of Kos, time would go on, patient, unhurried. Leontios leaned back and closed his eyes. "Will you tell me a story?" he asked. "Of course," Hippocrates said. Let me tell you of the time I visited the oracle at Didyma. And as the sun dipped lower, the master's voice drifted like a lullaby on the wind, soft, steady, ancient. The earth turned slowly beneath them, carrying their small moment into eternity. Morning arrived with a hush. No dramatic sunrise, no clamorous roosters. Just a soft blue unfurling in the eastern sky, like a sheet being drawn gently across the heavens. Hippocrates awoke in his simple home, nestled among the low hills of Kos, to the sound of doves cooing under the eaves. He sat up slowly, his joints creaking in gentle protest, and reached for a clay cup of water beside his bed. The floor was cool under his bare feet. Outside, the leaves of the olive trees whispered like the murmurs of old friends. The old physician moved without haste, every motion deliberate, almost ceremonial. He was no longer young, but age had brought with it a stillness that even time seemed to respect. After breaking his fast with figs and a few nuts, Hippocrates stepped out into the open air. The light had that golden quality, not the brightness of noon, but the quiet warmth of a day yet unspoiled. His steps led him along a worn path to one of his favorite places, an ancient olive grove older than memory. Some of the trees here were twisted and vast, with trunks like sculptures and roots like anchors sunk deep into the earth's wisdom. One tree in particular, standing atop a small rise, was known on the island as the Patient One. It had survived droughts, storms, and even fire, and yet still bore fruit each season with quiet generosity. Hippocrates rested his hand on the gnarled bark. Still standing, he murmured. He had sat beneath this tree as a young man and had brought his own children here when they were little. Now he often came to sit and think, not to plan, but to reflect. He took a seat on a flat stone near its roots, where moss had grown soft and green. The cicadas were beginning their morning chorus, a slow build of sound that seemed to rise with the warming sun. As he sat, a familiar voice called from down the slope. "Master, I've brought the scrolls." Leontios approached, carrying a satchel of papyrus rolls and a folded cloth. "Scrolls?" Hippocrates asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought we were to speak with the trees today." Leontios grinned. "You said knowledge grows in silence. I brought both." He joined his teacher on the moss, spreading out the cloth and placing the scrolls gently upon it. They were writings Hippocrates had begun long ago, mostly notes on illnesses, observations of nature, and quiet philosophies, what he called his quiet scrolls. "Read," Hippocrates said simply, leaning back against the tree. Leontios opened the first scroll and began. "Observe first the breath. Where it is steady, life may yet hold. Where it is broken or shallow, listen more closely, for the soul may already be turning toward the other side of the river." He paused. "You wrote this after tending to that fisherman last spring, didn't you?" "I did," Hippocrates replied. "He lived for another month, and every day he greeted the sea as though it had never left him." Leontios read more. "The root of pain is not always of the body. Often it lies in loneliness, in the sorrow that cannot speak its name. When you treat the body, ask first of the heart." He stopped again. Do you still believe that? More than ever, said Hippocrates. The flesh is honest, but the spirit, it hides. They continued reading for some time. The morning stretched itself lazily across the hills. A shepherd passed in the distance, waving as he led his flock along the ridge. The bells of the goats were soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby played upon the breeze. After a long pause, Leontios spoke again. Master, may I ask you a difficult question? You know I welcome them. Why do you never speak of your wife? The question floated in the space between them like a leaf upon still water. Hippocrates did not respond at once. His eyes drifted to the horizon, where sea and sky touched with impossible softness. I do not speak of her because her memory speaks so often to me, he said at last. Leontios lowered his gaze, sensing the depth of the words. She died many years ago. Hippocrates continued, his voice calm. But in many ways, she is the reason I still walk these hills. She once told me that the olive tree teaches the greatest lesson of medicine. Leontios looked up, curious. What lesson is that? That healing is not quick. That strength is not loud. And that some things, the most vital things, grow slowly and only in silence. They sat in quiet after that, not awkwardly, but as men who understood that not all thoughts need reply. The sun moved higher, casting the tree's shadow to the left. Bees buzzed lazily around the lavender growing in a nearby patch of earth. Eventually, Hippocrates rose and stretched. Come, he said, let us walk to the well. Together, they followed the winding path to a natural spring nestled between smooth stones and shaded by fig trees. Hippocrates dipped his hands into the cool water, splashing his face and taking a slow, grateful sip. Some say wisdom lies in books, he said, wiping his brow. Others in temples. I have found it most often in the places water flows freely, and where trees stand without need for praise. Leontios crouched beside him. And in old teachers who speak slowly, he added with a smile. Hippocrates chuckled, the sound light like falling leaves. They stayed by the spring until the sun reached its highest point. The world shimmered with heat, but in the shaded grove, time moved differently, like honey poured from a clay jar. As they made their way back toward the town, a young girl ran up the hill toward them. Master Hippocrates, she cried. Come quickly! My brother, he has a fever. Without pause, Hippocrates handed his staff to Leontios and followed the child down the slope. His pace was steady, calm. He had walked this road 100 times, to houses filled with tears, with hope, with fear. And always he brought the same thing, not miracles, not certainty, but presence. As he disappeared into the trees, Leontios stood under the patient olive tree, the scrolls still in his satchel, and understood something for the first time. That medicine was not the act of curing, but the art of caring, and that every step, every word, every quiet hour beneath the tree, all of it was part of the healing. The soft whisper of morning winds swept through the sacred groves of Kos, carrying with it the scent of lavender and olive blossoms. The sun had just begun its slow rise over the Aegean Sea, casting a golden shimmer across the quiet white columns of the Asclepian, a sanctuary of healing and reflection. Birds chirped lazily in the trees, as if even they respected the solemn pace of this tranquil morning. Hippocrates walked slowly along the marble path that led toward the innermost garden of the sanctuary. His steps were measured, deliberate, every motion an extension of his thoughts. In his left hand, he carried a scroll of papyrus, one he had written during the night after waking from a dream about the body and the soul. The Asclepian was not only a place of healing, but of learning. It stood as a living text, inscribed with centuries of wisdom passed down from healer to healer. Here, patients did not come for potions or hasty cures, but for understanding, of balance, of nature, of themselves. Today, Hippocrates was to meet with a young apprentice, a boy from the northern hills who had shown both curiosity and reverence, two qualities he valued more than cleverness. The boy's name was Cleon, and this would be their first walk together through the garden of Asclepian. Hippocrates reached the heart of the garden, where a large fig tree stretched wide over a shaded bench carved from ancient stone. He sat and waited. The quiet around him was not silence, but a gentle hum, bees among blossoms, distant waves on the shore, and the occasional sigh of wind through olive leaves. Soon the boy arrived. Cleon was perhaps 13 summers old, with dark curls and a quiet, watchful demeanor. He bowed respectfully and stood in front of the physician. "Sit, Cleon," said Hippocrates, his voice low and even, like the rhythm of the sea. "Tell me, what does healing mean to you?" The boy paused. "To make pain stop?" Hippocrates smiled faintly. "A common answer. But look deeper. What is pain?" The boy shifted uncomfortably. "Something that tells us when something is wrong." "And what is wrong?" Cleon furrowed his brow. "Something that breaks the balance." "Good." Hippocrates nodded. "Pain is the body's whisper, then shout, then cry. We do not fight it, we listen. Pain tells the story of imbalance. Healing is the act of listening deeply and then responding with harmony." They sat together for a while in thoughtful silence. Above them, the fig leaves rustled, and a cicada began its patient, rhythmic song. The garden was a living classroom. Hippocrates unrolled his scroll. It was not filled with instructions or prescriptions, but with small poetic observations on sleep, on hunger, on breath. "These are the rhythms of health," he said. "Each person has a music inside them. When that music falters, the healer must become a listener first." Cleon leaned in, eyes wide. "Is there always music?" "There is always something," said Hippocrates. "Even in silence, the heart speaks." He pointed to a small pool at the center of the garden. Its surface reflected the sky, though not perfectly. Tiny ripples danced from the breeze. "This is how the soul reflects the world. When disturbed, it cannot give back what it sees. The healer's task is not to fix the sky, but to calm the waters." The lesson continued not in words, but in shared presence. They walked among the healing herbs, chamomile, rosemary, and valerian. Hippocrates taught their properties not just by name, but by scent, by touch, by their habits in sun and shadow. plants, he said, are teachers. Some are loud, bright, insistent. Others are shy, needing patience. We are not so different. The morning passed slowly, wrapped in golden light and shaded truths. By midday, they returned to the stone bench, and Hippocrates handed the boy a small vial of oil. For your dreams, he said. Cleon took it reverently. To heal me? No, said the old man. To help you listen when dreams begin to speak. The lesson ended. But the quiet did not. As Cleon walked back through the marble corridor, the boy looked over his shoulder one last time at the old healer, now seated once more under the fig tree, eyes closed, as if listening to the earth itself. And in that moment, Cleon understood something not told, but felt, that wisdom was not loud, nor fast, nor proud. It was like the breeze that stirred the olive leaves, gentle, steady, and always there for those who paused to notice. Evening came slowly in the hills of Kos. As the golden light faded, it melted into hues of dusty rose and deep indigo. One by one, stars pricked through the velvet sky, as if the gods themselves were lighting small lanterns above the world. The air cooled gently, carrying with it the scent of herbs that had warmed in the sun all day, thyme, mint, and lavender drifting on the breeze like old, familiar songs. Hippocrates stood on the upper terrace of the Asclepian, wrapped in a simple woolen cloak. His eyes were fixed upon the horizon, where the moon rose calmly, serene and full. Behind him, the sanctuary slumbered in peace, its marble columns glowing faintly in the moonlight, its courtyards quiet except for the slow rhythm of crickets and the soft rustling of olive branches. He was not alone. Beside him stood Myrto, one of the sanctuary's stewards and a long-time companion of quiet wisdom. She was older now, her dark hair streaked with silver, but her gaze remained sharp, her presence steady. They had worked together for many years, he with the body, she with the soul. Myrto was known for her dream guidance and the art of incubation, helping patients find insight through sacred sleep. I saw you walking with Cleon today, she said softly, her eyes following a distant star that blinked near the edge of the sky. Hippocrates nodded. He listens more than he speaks. That is rare. Myrto smiled. And valuable. The stars favor those who learn in silence. The two stood without speaking for a while, their eyes lifted to the heavens. The stars above, ancient and patient, shimmered as they always had. No matter the changes of men, the sky remained a constant rhythm, an eternal script written in light. Do you ever feel small beneath all this? Myrto asked after a while. Hippocrates shook his head gently. No, I feel placed. She looked at him. We are part of a great body, he continued. The sky is its mind, the sea its breath, and the earth its bones. When I gaze at the stars, I do not feel diminished. I feel aligned. A hush fell between them once more. Below, the garden of the Asclepian exhaled in deep green shadows. Lanterns flickered by the patient's chambers, and soft voices of those sharing dreams wafted up from open windows. Do you remember when we were apprentices? Myrto mused. Barely, Hippocrates said with a rare chuckle. but I remember our mentor's sandals. They squeaked. Myrtle laughed, the sound like wind in leaves. And his voice, like dry leaves, always rustling. They shared a moment of memory. Then she said more quietly, "He taught us with stories, not instructions." "As it should be," said Hippocrates. "Stories go deeper. They do not merely inform, they root themselves in us." Murdo turned toward him. "Will you teach Cleon with stories?" "I already am," said Hippocrates. And indeed, the boy had already begun collecting the tales. Not just the legends of gods and monsters, but the small, sacred stories of the body. How the heart dances when in love, how the breath slows when at peace, how the stomach speaks when troubled. Hippocrates believed that each part of the body held its own tale, waiting to be heard by a healer who listened well enough. "Come," he said, gesturing toward a wooden bench beneath a cypress tree. "Let us sit and share one more story before the night deepens." They settled into the quiet curve of the bench, wrapped in soft silence, and Hippocrates began to speak. "There was once a boy," he said, "who came to the sanctuary because he had stopped dreaming. Not nightmares, not fear. Just nothing. Each night, he closed his eyes and fell into silence, as though the well of his inner world had dried." Myrtle listened, her eyes half closed. The healers gave him herbs to relax, prayers to guide him, and baths to ease the spirit. Still no dreams. So he was sent to an old man who lived in the hills, not a physician, not a priest, but a gardener. Myrto smiled knowingly. The gardener did not give him medicine. He gave him a seed and told him, "Plant this where you think your soul lives." The boy chose a place near the river, where the breeze was soft and the sun gentle. He planted the seed and visited it each day. "And," Myrto whispered, "it grew," Hippocrates said. Slowly, steadily. The boy began to notice its leaves, its scent, how it responded to light. In time, he began to dream, not of fantastic beasts or gods, but of the plant. He dreamed of its roots, of rain falling on its petals, of bees resting on its blossoms. "So what cured him?" Myrto asked. "Listening," said Hippocrates. "Attention is the first act of healing." He gave attention, and in return, his inner world opened once more. They sat in silence, absorbing the story like water into dry earth. Above, the stars continued their quiet vigil. The moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the hills. Far below, a patient sighed in sleep, and a soft breeze moved through the cypress needles like a distant hymn. "We should sleep," said Myrto at last. Hippocrates nodded. "Yes. Dreams await." They parted with a soft gesture, no words needed. And as the great healer made his way back to his simple stone chamber, he paused once to look up again at the stars. Each one a silent teacher. Each one a soft reminder that the world, vast as it was, could be both mysterious and kind. And in that deep peace, Hippocrates closed his eyes and returned to the music of sleep. The dawn broke softly over the island of Kos, casting a tender pink glow on the white stone walls of the Asclepian. Morning birds sang their peaceful melodies, weaving threads of sound into the cool, still air. The scent of wet earth mingled with the fragrance of blooming oleander, carrying promises of a new day. Hippocrates rose with the sun, feeling the familiar calm settle within him like a quiet river. His morning routine was simple, gently tending the small garden outside his chamber, where wild thyme and sage grew between olive trees. Each leaf, each delicate flower, seemed to hold its own story of healing and patience. As he moved among the plants, his thoughts wandered to his students. Among them, Cleon, the boy who listened more than spoke, carried a rare spirit. Hippocrates admired the youth's humility, knowing that true wisdom was often silent. Later that morning, in the shaded courtyard, Hippocrates gathered with his apprentices. They sat cross-legged on woven mats, their faces bright with curiosity, their hands folded respectfully. The day's lesson was not written on tablets or spoken in loud declarations, but passed gently, like a breeze through the leaves. "My students," Hippocrates began softly, "healing is not only about treating the body. It is about understanding the life that flows through it, the breath, the spirit, the unseen balance." He gestured toward the fig tree whose wide branches stretched above them, leaves whispering secrets in the sunlight. "Observe this tree," he said. "It does not rush to grow. It takes time to root deeply, to gather strength from the earth and light from the sun. So must we learn to be patient with those who suffer." The apprentices nodded, their eyes following the slow sway of the branches. "In our work, we listen, not just with ears, but with the heart. We notice the smallest signs, a tremor, a silence, a glance. These speak truths that no words can fully capture." Cleon leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowed in concentration. Hippocrates smiled gently. "There is a story for this, too. Long ago, a traveler came to a village sick and weary. The healers gave him herbs and baths, but he did not improve. So an old woman took his hand and asked him simply to walk with her through the olive groves." He paused, letting the apprentices imagine the soft rustle of leaves and the dappled sunlight on the path. As they walked, the old woman noticed the traveler's limp, the way he favored one side, and the tension in his breath. She asked him about his fears, his memories, his hopes. Slowly, the traveler began to open. His body responded to her care, but so did his spirit. Hippocrates' voice softened. "Healing is an art of presence. It is the quiet giving of attention that lets brokenness mend." The apprentices sat quietly, the lesson settling like morning dew on their souls. Afterward, Hippocrates walked alone by the sea. The waves lapped rhythmically against the shore, steady and eternal. He thought about how each patient was like the ocean, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, but always part of a greater whole. In this thought he found peace. And with peace, the power to heal. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the island of Kos. The soft murmur of the sea filled the air, blending with the distant call of fishermen mending their nets. Hippocrates made his way toward a quiet cove known for its natural springs, waters said to possess healing powers long revered by the people. The path was lined with wildflowers and herbs, rosemary, lavender, and marjoram, their scents mingling into a fragrant lullaby for the senses. Hippocrates breathed deeply, letting the calm embrace him, grounding him in the present moment. The spring bubbled gently, clear as crystal, its cool water shimmering in the sunlight. Kneeling by its edge, Hippocrates cupped his hands and drank slowly, feeling the refreshing flows soothe the dryness of his throat. He recalled stories passed down through generations, of travelers who had found comfort here, not only in the water but in the quiet solitude it offered. Healing, he knew, was as much about restoring the mind and spirit as it was about the body. Nearby, an elderly woman arrived carrying a small basket. Her eyes, soft yet keen, met Hippocrates with a knowing smile. "Good morning, wise healer," she said gently. "The waters are kind today." Hippocrates nodded in greeting. "And so are you, my friend." She set her basket down and motioned for him to join her on the smooth stones. Together they spoke in hushed tones about the nature of health and the delicate balance that sustains life. "The body is like this spring," the woman said thoughtfully. "It flows best when unblocked and free. But when burdens gather, pain, worry, sorrow, the flow falters." Hippocrates listened intently, his heart echoing the truth in her words. "It is our duty," she continued, "to guide the flow back to harmony, with patience and kindness." Their conversation drifted into silence as they watched the gentle ripple of water and the slow dance of sunlight across its surface. For Hippocrates, moments like these were reminders that healing was not rushed. It was a journey, a song sung softly over time. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape, Hippocrates rose with a renewed sense of purpose. The healing waters had refreshed not only his body but also his spirit. He knew that tomorrow he would return to his students, to his patients, carrying this quiet strength with him, a legacy of peace, patience, and gentle care. And as night fell, the island whispered its ancient lullaby, cradling all who rested beneath the stars in its timeless embrace. The evening air was cool and soft, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the distant sound of cicadas singing their gentle song. Hippocrates walked slowly along a narrow path winding through olive groves, the silvery leaves shimmering faintly in the moonlight. This path was one he had walked many times before, a quiet refuge from the bustle of the day, a place to gather his thoughts and listen deeply to the world around him. Each step was deliberate and slow, a meditation in motion. The night was calm, and the stars above twinkled like distant lanterns guiding the way. Hippocrates felt the weight of the day lift from his shoulders as he breathed in the stillness, the peaceful rhythm of his footsteps matching the beating of his heart. Along the path, he noticed the delicate shapes of wildflowers closed in rest, their petals folded like tiny hands in prayer. He smiled softly, understanding that all life moves in cycles, moments of activity followed by moments of rest and renewal. At a small clearing, a gentle breeze stirred the branches, and the soft rustle sounded like a whispered lullaby. Hippocrates paused, closing his eyes to listen fully. The world was speaking in quiet tones, inviting him to join in its harmony. In this silence, he reflected on the lessons of healing, that sometimes the greatest power lay not in doing, but in being. being present, being patient, being gentle. He thought of his patients, some struggling with pain, some burdened by worries unseen. For them, and for all who sought healing, he understood that the path was often slow and winding. It required trust and faith in the quiet unfolding of time. As the moon rose higher, bathing the grove in soft silver light, Hippocrates knelt to touch the earth. He felt its coolness, its steady strength beneath his fingers, and was reminded of the deep roots that support all growth. The night stretched on like a soft blanket, wrapping the island in its tender embrace. And Hippocrates, with a heart full of quiet wisdom, continued his walk, a gentle guardian of peace, a healer of both body and soul. The morning sun peeked gently over the hills surrounding coasts, spilling warm amber light across the land. Birds stirred softly in the olive trees, and the distant murmur of the sea blended with the early sounds of the village awakening. Hippocrates rose before dawn, his mind calm and steady like the sea at first light. Today was a day of gathering, a time to meet with the village elders and share stories of healing, compassion, and care. In the main courtyard of the Asclepian, a circle had been arranged. The elders sat with quiet dignity, their faces marked by years of wisdom and gentle smiles. Around them gathered the villagers, young and old, each eager to listen, to learn, and to share. Hippocrates took his place among them, feeling the warmth of the circle, a symbol of unity and mutual support. He began softly. Healing is not the work of one alone. It is a circle, where each hand supports the other, where every voice is heard, and every heart cared for. He spoke of the importance of community, the way people's lives are woven together like the branches of an olive tree, each branch strong because it is part of the whole. The body is like the village, he said. If one part suffers, all feel the pain. But if we care for each other, if we share our strength and kindness, the whole can flourish. The elders nodded in agreement, and the villagers murmured softly, comforted by the thought. As the day unfolded, stories were shared, tales of healing herbs, of patient listening, of hands held in kindness through long nights of suffering. Each story was a thread, weaving a tapestry of hope and connection. Hippocrates listened more than he spoke, allowing the circle to breathe and grow in its gentle rhythm. By the afternoon, the sun had climbed high, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh bread and wildflowers. Children played nearby, their laughter a joyful counterpoint to the calm gathering. When the circle slowly dispersed, Hippocrates stayed a moment longer, feeling the deep bond that had been renewed. He knew that healing was more than medicine. It was the care we give each other in the quiet moments, the trust we build in the simple acts of kindness. As the village settled into the evening hush, Hippocrates felt a profound gratitude. The circle of care was alive, steady and true, a light that would guide them all through days yet to come. As the sun began to dip below the distant mountains, the sky turned a soft shade of pink and lavender, painting the horizon with gentle strokes of color. The village of Kos slowly quieted, the day's activity giving way to a peaceful stillness that settled over the land like a warm blanket. Hippocrates walked toward the edge of the village where the fields stretched out in rolling waves of grain and wildflowers. The air was cool and fragrant with the scent of thyme and sage, carried softly by the evening breeze. In the distance, the soft sound of a lyre drifted through the air, a melody both simple and profound. The music seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of the twilight, inviting all who heard it to pause, to breathe, and to listen. Hippocrates found a smooth stone beneath an ancient olive tree and sat down, allowing the music to wash over him. He closed his eyes and felt the day's worries melt away, replaced by a deep sense of calm and connection. He thought of the cycles of nature, the rising and setting of the sun, the changing of the seasons, the steady flow of life that moved without hurry or hesitation. In these rhythms, he found a mirror for the healing journey, gentle, steady, and unforced. The evening song reminded him that rest was a vital part of this journey. Just as the earth sleeps beneath the stars to gather strength for a new day, so too must the body and mind find their quiet moments to renew. Nearby, a group of villagers gathered, their faces glowing softly in the fading light. They joined their voices in song, their harmonies blending with the lyre's gentle notes. Hippocrates smiled, feeling the warmth of community and the power of shared peace. The psalm was a gift, a lullaby for the soul, a promise that no one walks alone in the journey toward healing. As darkness deepened, the stars began to twinkle overhead, each one a tiny beacon of hope in the vast night sky. Hippocrates rose slowly, feeling the peace of the evening settle deeply within him. With a final look toward the glowing horizon, he turned back toward the village, carrying the evening song in his heart, a gentle reminder that in every ending there is the quiet promise of a new beginning. The first light of dawn crept softly over the hills surrounding the island of Kos, painting the sky with hues of pale gold and soft rose. The air was crisp and cool, filled with the delicate fragrance of blooming oleander and the distant call of morning birds. Hippocrates rose quietly from his simple bed, feeling the calm energy of the new day settle around him like a comforting shawl. The world was still wrapped in the hush of early morning, a precious moment when the earth seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the sun to fully awaken it. He stepped outside his home and took a slow, deep breath, savoring the peacefulness. The village was just beginning to stir. A few farmers could be seen tending their fields, their movements steady and unhurried. Hippocrates walked toward the small temple of Asclepius, the god of healing, where he often sought inspiration and clarity. The marble columns gleamed softly in the dawn light, and the gentle murmur of the sea could be heard nearby, a soothing backdrop to the quiet morning. As he entered the temple grounds, he paused to feel the sacredness of the space. Here, amidst the soft glow of morning, he felt a deep connection to the natural rhythms of life and healing. He knelt before the altar, offering a silent prayer of gratitude for the gift of another day, a day to learn, to teach, and to care. Hippocrates understood that each morning brought with it a new beginning, a chance to walk gently through the world and to bring healing not only to bodies but also to hearts and minds. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the island, Hippocrates felt a quiet determination. Today, like every day, he would walk the path of compassion and wisdom, guided by the gentle light of understanding. The morning light was a promise, a reminder that healing is a journey, unfolding one peaceful step at a time. In the heart of Kos, a gentle river wound its way through the landscape, its clear waters murmuring softly as they traveled over smooth stones and beneath arching branches. The river was a quiet companion to the village, a source of life and a place of stillness. One afternoon, Hippocrates found himself drawn to the riverbank, seeking the calm that the flowing water always seemed to bring. He settled on a large rock, feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin and listening to the gentle whisper of the current. As he gazed into the water, he thought about the nature of healing, how it moved like the river itself, sometimes slow and steady, sometimes rushing forward, but always flowing toward renewal. The river's voice seemed to speak in riddles and songs, reminding him that healing was not a simple path. It was shaped by many forces, the seasons, the land, the people's hearts. Hippocrates closed his eyes and breathed deeply, allowing the river's rhythm to seep into his soul. He remembered the lessons he had learned from the earth and sky, from the laughter and tears of the village. Healing required patience, humility, and a gentle touch. It was not only about curing illness, but also about nurturing hope and understanding. Nearby, a mother sat with her child, dipping their toes in the cool water. Their quiet joy was a living example of the river's promise, that life, even in its simplest moments, was a gift to be cherished. Hippocrates smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of peace. The river would continue its journey, as would he, guided always by the whisper of compassion and the steady flow of time. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows and bathing the world in golden light, Hippocrates rose and walked slowly back toward the village, carrying the river's whisper within him, a gentle reminder of the enduring power of healing and hope. As twilight deepened and the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, a hush fell over the island of Kos. The village lay quiet beneath a blanket of soft shadows, and the air was cool with the promise of rest. Hippocrates stood outside his home, gazing upward at the vast expanse of the night sky. The stars shimmered like countless tiny lanterns, each one a silent witness to the unfolding story of life. He felt a deep connection to those distant lights, as if they were embracing him with their steady, gentle glow. The stars, ancient and enduring, reminded him of the timeless nature of healing, the way it transcended moments and generations, weaving all beings together in a tapestry of care and hope. Hippocrates breathed in the stillness, letting it fill his heart with calm and clarity. The quiet night was a space for reflection, for dreams, and for the gentle nurturing of the soul. He thought of the patients he had cared for that day, their courage, their fears, and their quiet strength. Each was like a star in the night, unique and shining in their own way. As a soft breeze rustled the olive leaves, Hippocrates whispered a prayer of gratitude for the gift of life, the power of kindness, and the enduring light of compassion. The stars seemed to pulse gently in response, as if offering their own silent blessing. With a peaceful heart, Hippocrates turned and stepped inside, ready to rest and renew. Tomorrow would bring a new dawn, a new chance to walk the path of healing with gentle wisdom. In the embrace of the night sky, he found a quiet assurance that even in darkness, there is always light, always hope, always the promise of another day. The first light of a new day stretched softly across the island of Kos, spilling golden hues over olive groves and whitewashed homes. The gentle breeze carried the scent of wild herbs and the distant murmur of the sea, wrapping the village in a serene embrace. Hippocrates awoke to this quiet beauty, feeling the weight of the night's peace lingering in his mind. Today, he thought, was a day for deeper understanding, not only of the body but of the mind and spirit. He dressed simply and stepped outside, his footsteps light upon the earth. The village was stirring, soft voices, the clinking of pottery, the gentle stirring of animals, all the ordinary sounds that mark the rhythm of daily life. He made his way to a small garden he had tended for years, where medicinal plants flourished under the warm sun. The rosemary, sage, and lavender seemed to nod as he passed, welcoming him with their quiet strength. Hippocrates knelt beside the plants, touching their leaves gently. Each held secrets of healing passed down through generations, whispered by the earth itself. As he worked, his thoughts wandered to the people he served, their worries, their hopes, their struggles. Healing, he realized, was not merely the absence of illness but the presence of balance and harmony. He recalled the teachings of his father and teachers, the careful observation of symptoms, the understanding of nature's cycles, and the importance of the patient's own spirit in the healing journey. The dawn was not just a time of light but a symbol, a beginning, a renewal, a chance to see clearly and to act with kindness. Hippocrates stood and looked toward the horizon, where the sun now rose fully, casting a warm glow over the land. In that light, he felt a quiet resolve to continue learning, to continue healing, and to always remember the gentle wisdom that guides the hand and heart. Today, like every day, was a gift, a moment to embrace with calm and compassion. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the gentle hills of Kos. The village hummed softly with the calm rhythm of daily life, the occasional laughter of children mixing with the distant bleating of goats. Hippocrates found himself walking along a narrow path that wound through fields of wildflowers and olive trees. The path was quiet, inviting him to slow his steps and listen closely to the rustling leaves, the soft buzz of bees, and the distant calls of birds. This path, he thought, was much like the journey of healing, sometimes winding and uncertain, but always moving forward with purpose. He paused beneath a large olive tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like welcoming arms. The tree had stood here for generations, a silent witness to the passing of time and the lives it sheltered. Hippocrates sat down beneath the tree's shade, letting the peace of the moment wash over him. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the earth steady beneath him and the sky vast above. Healing, he mused, required more than knowledge and skill. It required patience and presence, a willingness to walk gently alongside those who suffer. He thought of the many faces he had seen, the weary, the hopeful, the frightened, and the quiet strength that often bloomed in the heart of pain. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with soft pinks and purples, Hippocrates rose and continued along the path, carrying with him the quiet wisdom of the earth. Each step was a reminder that healing is not a race, but a journey, a quiet path to be traveled with care, kindness, and an open heart. As twilight settled softly over the island, Hippocrates returned to the small garden he cherished, a sanctuary where healing herbs and quiet thoughts grew side by side. The air was cool, touched with the scent of lavender and thyme, wrapping the space in a gentle embrace. He moved slowly among the plants, his fingers brushing lightly over the leaves and petals. The garden was more than a place of medicine. It was a space of reflection, where the mind could rest and the heart could find peace. In the fading light, Hippocrates contemplated the days past, the patients he had helped, the lessons learned, and the moments of quiet understanding that often came unbidden. Healing, he thought, was a dance between body and soul. It required not only the art of medicine, but also the grace of compassion and the courage to face the unknown. He paused beside a cluster of chamomile, its tiny white flowers nodding gently in the evening breeze. Chamomile, known for its calming touch, seemed to embody the very essence of peace. Closing his eyes, Hippocrates allowed himself to simply be present, grounded, and open to the wisdom of the moment. The garden whispered softly around him, a reminder that healing is as much about stillness as it is about action. With the stars beginning to sparkle above, Hippocrates rose, carrying the calm of the garden within him. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges and new hopes, but for now, he embraced the quiet, gentle night. The sun had fully dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft afterglow that gently faded into the deep blue of night. The village of Kos settled into a peaceful quietness, the sounds of daytime activity replaced by the gentle chorus of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. Hippocrates sat near the flickering light of an oil lamp outside his humble home. The soft glow illuminated his thoughtful face, casting gentle shadows that danced with the evening breeze. The day's work was done, and yet his mind wandered to the mysteries still unfolding within the human body and spirit. He thought about the many ailments he had witnessed, not just physical wounds, but invisible burdens carried quietly in the heart. He sipped slowly from a small cup of warm herbal tea, the delicate flavors soothing and familiar. The herbs, chosen carefully from his garden, seemed to carry the very essence of comfort. Around him, the night sky stretched wide and full of stars, each one a tiny beacon of hope and constancy. Hippocrates felt a deep kinship with those distant lights, their quiet endurance mirroring his own dedication to healing. He knew that true healing required time, patience, and a gentle heart. It was a journey not only for the patient but also for the healer, one that demanded humility and endless compassion. As the night deepened, Hippocrates allowed himself a moment of stillness, letting the peace of the evening fill his soul. The gentle night embraced him like a warm cloak, wrapping the world in calm and promise. With a soft sigh, he rose and prepared to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new lessons, new hopes, and the ongoing dance of healing and care. Before the sun rose, the world was wrapped in a soft silence, the quiet breath before the day's first light. Hippocrates stirred gently, awakening in the stillness of dawn. The air was cool, carrying a faint whisper of the sea beyond the hills. He rose with care, moving softly through his simple home. His mind, serene and clear, welcomed the fresh promise of the morning. Outside, the sky began to blush with pale shades of pink and gold, the earth slowly stirring from its nightly rest. Stepping outside, Hippocrates took a deep breath, feeling the coolness fill his lungs and the calmness settle in his heart. The village was just beginning to awaken, soft murmurs, the low calls of fishermen preparing their boats, the gentle clatter of pottery. He wandered toward a quiet spot near the shore where the waves kissed the stones in gentle rhythm. Sitting there, he allowed his thoughts to drift like the tide, steady, peaceful, and unhurried. Hippocrates reflected on the lessons of the past days, the delicate balance between mind and body, the power of nature's remedies, and the profound importance of kindness. He knew healing was not a destination but a path, a quiet journey walked one gentle step at a time. As the sun finally peeked over the horizon, bathing the world in golden light, Hippocrates felt a renewed sense of purpose. The day ahead was a new chapter, filled with opportunities to listen, to learn, and to bring comfort. With the dawn's soft glow warming his face, he rose, ready to continue his work with a calm and open heart. The day unfolded gently, with the sun casting a warm, golden light over the rolling hills and peaceful village of Kos. Hippocrates moved quietly through the streets, greeting familiar faces with a soft smile and gentle nod. In the small courtyard behind his home, a circle of villagers had gathered, a gathering of those seeking healing or simply comfort. Hippocrates welcomed them with a calm presence, his eyes full of quiet kindness. He began by speaking softly about the balance of the body, the mind, and the spirit, how each part influenced the other in a delicate dance. He shared stories of nature's gifts, of herbs and waters and the simple power of rest. The villagers listened with rapt attention, their worries easing with each word, their breaths slowing, their hearts opening. Hippocrates guided them through gentle breathing exercises, encouraging them to feel the earth beneath their feet and the calm within their chests. In this circle, healing was not just the work of one man, but the shared experience of community, of support, understanding, and hope. The afternoon light softened as the groups slowly dispersed, each person carrying a bit of that quiet healing within them. Hippocrates stood alone for a moment, looking up at the sky, feeling deeply grateful for the trust placed in him and for the endless journey of learning and care. As evening approached, he prepared for rest, knowing tomorrow would bring new faces, new stories, and the continuing circle of healing that bound them all. As dawn spread its gentle light across the hills of Kos, Hippocrates found himself drawn once again to the grove of ancient olive trees that stood quietly on the edge of the village. These trees, twisted by time yet full of life, held stories whispered through their silver-green leaves. He walked slowly beneath their branches, the soft rustling a soothing melody in the cool morning air. The earth beneath was soft and warm, dotted with fallen olives and the delicate scent of the Mediterranean. Here, in the presence of these enduring trees, Hippocrates felt a deep connection, not only to nature but to the generations who had walked this land before him, tending to both body and spirit. The olive tree, symbol of peace and endurance, reminded him of the quiet strength required in the art of healing. Like these trees, healing took patience, resilience, and gentle care. He paused to pick a handful of leaves, knowing their oil would be used in balms and salves, gifts from nature to soothe and restore. The grove seemed to breathe with a slow, steady rhythm, mirroring the calm steadiness Hippocrates sought in himself and wished to share with others. As he turned to leave, a soft breeze carried the scent of earth and leaves, a whispered promise that healing, like the olive trees, was a gift that endured through time. Hippocrates returned home with a peaceful heart, ready to greet the day with kindness and quiet wisdom. The village of Kos awoke under a soft morning light, the gentle warmth of the sun filtering through the open windows of Hippocrates' home. Inside, the air was calm and still, filled with the faint scent of herbs drying by the hearth. Hippocrates sat quietly, his hands resting gently on his knees, eyes closed as he focused inward. In the silence, he sought the calm that lay deep within, a place untouched by the worries of the world. He knew that healing was as much about the mind and spirit as it was about the body. The calm within was a sanctuary, a source of strength that all could find if only they paused and listened. Opening his eyes, Hippocrates gazed toward the garden outside where wildflowers swayed softly in the breeze. Their delicate petals moved with effortless grace, a reminder that peace was found not in force, but in gentle acceptance. Throughout the day, Hippocrates moved with quiet purpose, attending to his patients with a soft voice and steady hands, offering remedies crafted with care, but always reminding them to find moments of stillness within themselves. His presence alone seemed to calm restless hearts, his wisdom a balm for both body and soul. As evening approached, Hippocrates took a slow walk along the coast, watching the waves lap softly against the shore. The rhythmic sound soothed him, and he felt gratitude for the simple, enduring beauty of the world around him. He understood that each day was an opportunity to nurture that calm within, to share it, to teach it, and to live it. With the night settling around the village, Hippocrates returned home, carrying with him the peaceful rhythm of the day, ready to rest and prepare for the journey of healing that tomorrow would bring. The morning light spilled softly across the hills of Kos, bathing the village in a warm, golden glow. Hippocrates stood at the threshold of his home, watching as the day began with quiet promise. The world felt still yet full of gentle movement, an endless cycle of life unfolding with care. As he stepped outside, the familiar sights and sounds greeted him, the soft chatter of villagers preparing for their daily tasks, the distant call of seabirds soaring above the shimmering waters, and the steady rustle of olive branches swaying in the breeze. Hippocrates moved slowly through the village, his steps measured and calm. Each encounter was marked by a nod, a kind word, or a reassuring smile. His presence was a steady anchor amid the gentle rhythm of everyday life. Today, he carried with him a small bundle of herbs, lavender for peace, rosemary for memory, and chamomile for calm. These simple gifts from the earth were woven into remedies that soothed both body and mind. He visited the home of an elderly woman whose cough had lingered for weeks. With quiet care, he brewed a tea from the herbs, explaining the importance of rest and gentle breathing. She listened attentively, comforted by his words and the warmth of the cup. Throughout the day, Hippocrates found himself reflecting on the nature of healing, not as a swift conquest, but as a gentle path forward, one step at a time, with patience and kindness. As twilight approached, he returned to his garden, tending to the plants that would one day become medicines. The sky above shifted into shades of pink and violet, a serene canvas that mirrored the peacefulness he sought to nurture within. In this quiet moment, Hippocrates felt a deep gratitude for the journey he walked, a path not just of healing others, but of understanding himself and the delicate balance of life. With a calm heart, he prepared for the night, ready to rest and embrace whatever the coming day would bring. As the sun dipped slowly beyond the horizon, the village of Kos settled into a hush, wrapped in the soft glow of twilight. The air was fragrant with the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly turned earth, carrying the gentle promise of nightfall. Hippocrates sat on a smooth stone bench in his garden, his hands folded calmly in his lap. Around him, the plants he had nurtured swayed softly in the evening breeze, their leaves whispering secrets of growth and renewal. The quietness of the hour invited reflection, a chance to review the day's moments, the faces he had seen, the stories he had heard, and the healing he had shared. He thought of the old woman, now resting more peacefully, and the young child whose fever had lessened beneath his care. In these small victories, Hippocrates found deep meaning, not in grandeur or fame, but in the humble acts of kindness that knit the fabric of community. He breathed deeply, allowing the cool air to fill his lungs and soothe his thoughts. The stars began to emerge, twinkling softly above, a silent chorus watching over the night. Hippocrates' mind wandered gently to the teachings he had received as a youth, the lessons whispered by teachers and elders about balance, harmony, and the sacredness of life. These teachings were his compass, guiding him through uncertainty and change. With the night deepening, he rose slowly, feeling the calm settle within his bones. He moved indoors, lighting a small oil lamp whose soft flame flickered gently, casting warm shadows on the walls. Before resting, he wrote quietly in his journal, capturing thoughts and observations, a practice that grounded him, allowing insight to grow like the herbs in his garden. As he laid down to sleep, Hippocrates felt a profound sense of peace. The day had passed as it should, filled with quiet purpose and gentle care. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new moments to learn and to heal. But for now, in the stillness of the night, all was calm and all was well. The first light of dawn crept softly over the hills, casting a pale golden hue across the village of Kos. The world stirred gently, as if awakening from a peaceful slumber, and Hippocrates rose with the quiet grace of a new day. Outside, the air was cool and fresh, filled with the subtle fragrance of blooming oleander and the faint saltiness carried from the nearby sea. Hippocrates paused for a moment on his porch, breathing deeply and feeling the calm energy of the morning fill his being. Today was a day of reflection and learning, a day to deepen his understanding of the delicate balance between body and spirit, health and nature. He walked slowly through the village, exchanging gentle greetings with the villagers who were beginning their day. His eyes caught the soft smile of a young mother cradling her infant, the curious gaze of children gathering near the marketplace, and the steady hands of a fisherman preparing his nets. Each small moment held meaning, a reminder that life's true healing came not just from herbs or treatments, but from connection, compassion, and mindful presence. At the center of the village, Hippocrates met with a few of his students, young men and women eager to learn the art of medicine with a gentle heart. Together, they walked to a shaded grove, where dappled sunlight filtered through olive branches, creating a serene classroom beneath the sky. There, Hippocrates shared stories of ancient remedies and timeless wisdom, emphasizing the importance of listening, not just to the words of patients, but to the subtle signals of the body and the quiet language of nature. The students listened intently, their faces bright with curiosity and respect. They understood that healing was a path of patience, humility, and deep awareness. As the sun climbed higher, Hippocrates led them to gather healing plants, explaining each leaf and flower with care. They moved slowly, their steps in harmony with the rhythm of the earth beneath their feet. Returning to the village, the group prepared gentle remedies and shared quiet conversations about hope, balance, and the enduring power of kindness. When the day drew to a close, Hippocrates stood once more by the sea, watching as the sky blazed with the colors of sunset. The waves whispered softly against the shore, carrying the promise of renewal and peace. In that moment, he felt a deep gratitude for the path he walked, a path woven with calm, understanding, and the gentle light of new beginnings. As the golden hues of sunset faded into the soft blues and purples of evening, the village of Kos grew still, embracing the gentle calm that comes with the close of day. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of herbs and the distant murmur of the sea. Hippocrates found himself once again in his garden, surrounded by the plants that had long been his companions. The soft rustling of leaves in the breeze was like a quiet melody, soothing his thoughts and grounding his spirit. He sat quietly on a stone bench, reflecting on the lessons of the day. The conversations with his students, the smiles of the villagers, and the quiet moments of healing all wove together in his mind like a delicate tapestry. In this peaceful solitude, Hippocrates felt the presence of something deeper, a connection to the natural world, to the timeless flow of life and renewal. It was a reminder that healing was never rushed or forced but unfolded in its own perfect time. He breathed deeply, the cool air filling his lungs and calming his heart. The soft glow of lanterns began to appear along the village paths, casting gentle pools of light that shimmered like stars brought to earth. As night settled, Hippocrates returned indoors, where a simple meal awaited him. The warmth of the fire and the quiet comfort of his home invited rest and reflection. Before closing his eyes, he opened his journal and wrote slowly, capturing thoughts and insights from the day. Writing was a ritual that helped him release the mind's chatter and welcome peaceful rest. With the last lines penned, Hippocrates set down his pen and allowed a gentle smile to touch his lips. The world outside was calm, the night deep and still. He lay down to sleep, feeling gratitude for the quiet rhythms that shaped his days, the soft ebb and flow of life, the healing power of kindness, and the enduring light of understanding. And so, under the watchful stars, Hippocrates drifted into restful sleep, ready to greet the dawn with a heart full of peace. The morning light poured softly through the woven shutters of Hippocrates' humble home, spilling gentle rays upon the wooden floor. The village of Kos was slowly awakening, the familiar sounds of roosters crowing and the distant chatter of early risers carrying softly through the cool air. Hippocrates stretched lightly, savoring the slow, unhurried rhythm of dawn. Today promised a new beginning, a fresh opportunity to deepen his understanding of the delicate dance between health and nature. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb the peaceful calm that surrounded him, and made his way to the garden where fragrant herbs swayed gently in the morning breeze. The cool touch of dew on leaves and petals refreshed his spirit, grounding him in the present moment. As he moved through the rows of plants, Hippocrates reflected on the wisdom he had gathered over the years. The knowledge that true healing was not simply about curing illness, but about nurturing balance within the body and mind, and fostering harmony with the world around. His thoughts drifted to the villagers who depended on his care, the mother whose child had smiled today for the first time in days, the elder whose steps had grown steadier, and the friends who shared stories of hope and resilience. With gentle hands, Hippocrates harvested the herbs he would prepare for the day's remedies, his movements slow and deliberate, honoring the life within each leaf. Later, as the village fully stirred to life, Hippocrates met with a small group gathered beneath the ancient olive tree, a place where wisdom was shared and questions welcomed. His students listened intently as he spoke softly about patience, compassion, and the quiet strength found in understanding. The morning passed in calm conversation and quiet study, the air filled with a sense of purpose and peace. As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm golden glow, Hippocrates paused to rest beneath the tree's shade, feeling a deep gratitude for the simple beauty of this life, the gentle rhythms, the connections between people, and the endless cycle of renewal. With a heart full of calm, he prepared to continue his day, ready to meet each moment with kindness and quiet strength. As twilight embraced the village of Kos, painting the sky with soft shades of lavender and rose, Hippocrates made his way back home through winding paths lined with blooming oleander and fragrant thyme. The air was cool and calm, carrying the distant murmur of the sea as it kissed the shore. The day had been filled with quiet learning and healing, moments that flowed like a gentle stream, steady, serene, and full of purpose. Now, as the light faded, Hippocrates welcomed the comforting silence of evening, a time for reflection and gratitude. He settled once again in his garden, where the stars began to peek through the darkening canopy. The soft glow of lanterns flickered nearby, casting dancing shadows among the herbs and flowers. Here, in this peaceful sanctuary, Hippocrates felt a profound connection to the world, an unspoken understanding that all life was intertwined. Opening his journal, he wrote slowly, his thoughts drifting like the gentle night breeze. He recorded the lessons of the day, the small victories and the moments of stillness that had touched his heart. Each word was a quiet prayer, a wish for healing and harmony. As he closed the journal, Hippocrates looked up to the sky, where constellations glittered like ancient stories told long ago. He felt the presence of those who had walked this path before him, teachers, healers, and seekers of truth, guiding him still with their silent wisdom. With a peaceful sigh, Hippocrates rose and walked to his doorstep. The village lay quiet, wrapped in the soft embrace of night. He paused, taking in the cool air, and felt a deep sense of calm settle within. Tonight, like every night, he would sleep with a grateful heart, ready to greet the dawn with renewed hope and gentle strength. Before the first light of dawn had fully touched the horizon, Hippocrates was already awake, sitting quietly by the small oil lamp in his study. The world outside was still wrapped in darkness, save for the faint twinkle of distant stars and the gentle whisper of the morning breeze. This early hour was his time for contemplation, a sacred moment to connect with the stillness that often brought clarity and peace. The soft rustle of parchment and the faint scent of herbs filled the room as he prepared his thoughts for the day. In the gentle solitude, Hippocrates reflected on the true essence of healing. It was not merely the absence of illness, but the presence of balance between body and soul, between the self and the world. It was a patient art, a humble practice rooted in respect for life's delicate mysteries. He thought of the many villagers who had sought his guidance, their hopes, fears, and quiet strength. Each person was a story, a living lesson in resilience and grace. To serve them was both a privilege and a responsibility he bore with deep care. As the first blush of dawn painted the sky with soft pinks and golds, Hippocrates rose and stepped outside. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and wild thyme. The village was slowly stirring, awakening gently to a new day. Walking through the garden, he touched the leaves of medicinal plants, feeling their vitality and the promise they held. Nature, he knew, was the greatest healer of all, a teacher of patience, renewal, and quiet strength. Returning indoors, Hippocrates prepared simple remedies for those who would visit him today. His movements were deliberate and calm, each gesture a meditation in itself. With the rising sun casting warm light through the window, Hippocrates felt a deep gratitude for the gift of another day, for the quiet moments of healing, and for the gentle, unending journey of understanding. As the sun climbed steadily higher over the village of Kos, Hippocrates found himself drawn once more to the ancient olive tree that stood proudly in the village square. Its gnarled branches stretched wide, offering shelter and shade to all who paused beneath its leaves. The olive tree was more than just a silent guardian. It was a symbol of peace, endurance, and the quiet strength found in patience. Hippocrates often sat beneath its sprawling limbs, allowing the whispers of the wind through the leaves to soothe his thoughts and inspire his heart. Today, a small gathering had formed beneath the tree. Villagers of all ages, young and old, came to hear Hippocrates speak, not just as a healer, but as a teacher of life's gentle lessons. With calm voice and thoughtful words, he spoke about balance, the harmony between action and rest, between strength and tenderness. He explained how the olive tree survived countless seasons of sun and storm because it embraced the slow rhythm of growth, bending but never breaking. His listeners absorbed his words in quiet contemplation, feeling the peaceful energy of the tree as it mingled with the warm sunlight. After the gathering, Hippocrates walked slowly through the village paths, feeling the pulse of life around him, the laughter of children playing, the soft chatter of neighbors, and the distant song of the sea. In every step, he found a reminder that healing was not a solitary pursuit, but a shared journey, one woven through kindness, understanding, and the patient unfolding of time. As evening approached, Hippocrates returned home beneath the soft glow of twilight, carrying with him the gentle wisdom of the olive tree, a gift he would carry always in his heart. As the days drifted slowly onward in the gentle village of Kos, Hippocrates found comfort in the steady rhythm of the sea. Each morning, before the sun had risen fully, he would walk to the shoreline, feeling the cool sand beneath his feet and listening to the soft murmurs of the waves. The sea, with its endless expanse and quiet strength, spoke to him in ways words never could. It was a reminder of the vastness of life, the ebb and flow of moments, the cycles of change that shaped all living things. One particular morning, the air was crisp and the sky tinged with pale hues of pink and blue. Hippocrates settled on a smooth rock near the water's edge, closing his eyes as the gentle sea breeze whispered around him. He thought of healing once again, not just the healing of bodies, but the healing of spirits. The sea, in its patient and ceaseless dance, showed him that healing was a journey without a fixed destination, a continual return to balance and peace. Nearby, a group of children played quietly, their laughter mingling softly with the sound of the waves. Hippocrates watched them with a tender smile, remembering how simple moments of joy and connection were as vital to well-being as any medicine. Rising slowly, he walked back toward the village, the calming rhythm of the sea still echoing within him. He carried its soft murmurs in his heart, a gentle reminder that healing was as much about listening as it was about doing. That evening, as stars began to sprinkle across the sky, Hippocrates felt a deep gratitude for the lessons of the sea, its quiet strength, endless patience, and boundless grace. In the tranquil village of Kos, Hippocrates often found that the most profound moments of healing unfolded in silence. It was in these quiet spaces, free from noise and distraction, that the heart could truly listen and the soul could gently mend. One afternoon, after tending to the villagers, Hippocrates retreated to a secluded garden filled with blooming herbs and soft shadows. The warm sunlight filtered through the olive branches, casting delicate patterns upon the earth. He sat on a stone bench, closing his eyes to the world around him. The gentle hum of nature became a quiet symphony, a soft breeze rustling leaves, the distant chirping of birds, and the subtle scent of lavender carried by the air. In this peaceful stillness, Hippocrates reflected on the power of silence, not as emptiness, but as a sacred space where the body, mind, and spirit could align. He understood that in the modern hustle of life, silence was often overlooked, yet it was essential for true healing. As he sat, a young woman from the village approached quietly, seeking comfort after a time of sorrow. Hippocrates greeted her with a warm smile and invited her to join him in the silence. Together they sat without words, allowing the calm of the garden to soothe their hearts. The silence spoke more deeply than any language, weaving a gentle thread of peace between them. When the woman rose to leave, she carried with her a newfound sense of calm and strength, proof that healing was often found not in the rush of action, but in the quiet embrace of stillness. As twilight settled over the village, Hippocrates remained in the garden a while longer, grateful for the healing power of silence and the quiet moments that restored balance to the world. The village of Kos rested under a sky brushed with soft hues of lavender and gold, as the gentle evening breeze whispered through the olive groves. Hippocrates, ever the humble healer, understood that one of the most valuable lessons life offered was the gift of patience. He had witnessed countless moments when healing could not be hurried, when bodies needed time to recover and spirits required the gentle unfolding of peace. In those moments, rushing only disturbed the delicate balance. That day, an elderly man came to Hippocrates seeking help. His ailments had been troubling him for many moons, and his heart was heavy with worry. Hippocrates welcomed him with a kind smile and invited him to rest by the fire. Speaking softly, Hippocrates explained that true healing, like the growth of an olive tree, took time. Patience, he said, is the steady hand that guides us through hardship. Together, they prepared calming herbs and shared quiet conversation. Hippocrates encouraged the man to nurture hope, to trust in the slow, natural rhythm of the body's renewal. Days passed, and the man's strength slowly returned, nourished by gentle care and time. The villagers watched with quiet admiration, learning that sometimes the greatest courage was in waiting and believing. As stars began to twinkle above, Hippocrates walked through the village, feeling the soft pulse of life around him. In the stillness of night, he whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for patience, the unseen healer that mends the wounds of both body and soul. The sun rose gently over the hills of Kos, casting a warm golden light across the olive groves and fields of wildflowers. Hippocrates awoke to the soft chorus of birdsong, feeling the quiet harmony of the natural world surrounding him. This harmony, he believed, was the foundation of all healing. As he walked through the village, he noticed the delicate balance between human life and the earth, how the villagers respected the rhythms of the seasons, how they tended the land with care and gratitude. The healing power of nature was visible in every corner, the blooming herbs, the flowing streams, and the sturdy trees that had stood for generations. Hippocrates spent his day gathering plants, observing their growth and noting their uses. To him, every leaf, every root, held a story of life and renewal. He saw healing not as a battle against nature, but as a partnership, a dance between the body and the world it inhabited. Later, under the shade of a great olive tree, Hippocrates shared his thoughts with a young apprentice. To heal well, he said softly, we must learn to listen to the body, to the earth, and to the quiet messages that nature sends us. When we live in harmony with the world, healing flows more gently. The apprentice nodded, feeling the peaceful weight of these words. Together they sat in silence, breathing in the scents of the garden and feeling the steady pulse of life all around them. As twilight softened the sky into shades of lavender and rose, Hippocrates felt a deep calm settle over his heart. The harmony of nature was a timeless song, one that would guide all who listened toward peace and healing. As dawn's first light gently kissed the village of Kos, Hippocrates rose with a serene sense of purpose. Today, his thoughts dwelled on a truth he often shared with those who sought his counsel, the healing power that rests quietly within each person. He walked slowly through the village, observing the daily rhythms, children playing softly in the courtyard, elders tending gardens with gentle hands, and the subtle dance of light and shadow upon the stone walls. Amidst these simple moments, Hippocrates understood that strength was not always loud or forceful. Often, it was quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. Later, a young woman came to him, her eyes clouded with worry. She carried a burden of doubt, feeling weak and unsure. Hippocrates listened patiently, then gently placed his hand over hers. "True strength," he said softly, "is not the absence of struggle, but the courage to face it calmly and with hope. Inside you lies a wellspring of quiet strength, a gentle fire that can warm your spirit even on the coldest days." He spoke of patience, resilience, and the importance of trusting oneself. The woman's tense shoulders slowly relaxed as she absorbed his words, and a small smile began to bloom upon her lips. Hippocrates then guided her to a nearby olive tree, its gnarled branches strong despite centuries of weathering storms. "Like this tree," he said, "your roots run deep. Nurture that quiet strength within, and you will find peace." As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden glow across the village, Hippocrates felt a deep gratitude for the quiet moments, the shared stories, the silent understanding, and the unseen strength that lived in every heart. The afternoon sun and coast poured over the land like warm honey, turning every leaf and pebble into something sacred. Hippocrates, wrapped in his simple cloak, made his way to the small garden nestled behind the healing house, a place he often visited when the noise of the world pressed too closely. This garden was unlike others in the village. There were no rows of vegetables or baskets of herbs waiting to be dried. Here, wildflowers grew without rules, and tall grasses whispered secrets in the wind. In one quiet corner, smooth stones had been placed in careful circles, each marking a moment of thought or gratitude left behind by those who came before. Hippocrates moved slowly through the garden, his sandals brushing against thyme and soft moss. He knelt by a small spring, cupped water in his hands, and drank. The taste was pure, sweet with the memory of rain. He believed deeply that healing was not only of the body, but of the mind and soul. In this garden, people came to pause, to breathe, and to let go. Here, one could listen, truly listen, not only to the birds or the breeze, but to the quiet voice within. A young healer in training approached him, holding a bundle of scrolls. Her face carried the strain of learning, the weight of memorized names and ailments. "Master," she said softly, "how do I know when I'm ready to help others?" Hippocrates smiled and gestured to a bench beneath a flowering fig tree. "Sit," he said, "and listen." They sat in silence together, the air rich with lavender and mint. "You are not ready when you have all the answers," he finally spoke. "You are ready when you understand the importance of questions. When you learn to reflect with kindness, not only toward others, but toward yourself, then you will begin to truly heal." The girl closed her eyes and breathed in deeply. She felt the air fill her chest, calm her heartbeat, and soften her worry. She understood then that healing began with stillness. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, painting the sky in soft hues of coral and gold, the garden seemed to sigh with peace. Hippocrates stood slowly, leaving behind no trace but the gentleness of his words. "Return here often," he said. "The garden listens without judgment, and answers without words. That night, the garden glowed quietly under the moonlight, full of unspoken reflections and the enduring calm of a soul at rest. The island of Kos, surrounded by sapphire waters and whispering shores, was quiet in the hour before dawn. The stars still lingered in the sky like pearls forgotten on silk, and the breeze that stirred the olive branches carried with it a message older than memory. Hippocrates, rising as he always did in the stillness, wrapped his robe around his shoulders and stepped outside his modest home. The sea called softly in the distance, waves embracing the rocks with patience. But it was the wind that truly spoke to him today. It wasn't a harsh wind, nor a troubled one. It was curious, gentle, but insistent, as though it carried questions from the corners of the world, hoping that someone here might offer an answer. He walked slowly along the narrow path that led through groves of citrus and fig, toward the place where the hills opened like a bowl and the wind could speak more clearly. The grasses bowed to him as he passed, and the air was cool against his cheeks. When he reached the old stone bench beneath the cypress tree, the same bench his grandfather once sat upon, and his grandfather before him, he rested with a long exhale, the kind that empties not only the lungs, but the mind. There was something in the air today, not just the sea salt and rosemary, but a restlessness. Not fear, more like a yearning. From the east, a boy was coming. He had felt it before, the arrival of a visitor, long before they arrived. Like the wind itself brought the scent of their journey. And this boy, he sensed, had traveled far. Sure enough, by mid-morning, a slim figure appeared at the edge of the path. He was no more than 12, his tunic dusty, his sandals worn. But his eyes were bright, not from comfort or safety, but from purpose. "Are you the healer?" the boy asked, as if unsure he had reached the right reality. "I am a listener," Hippocrates replied. "Sometimes that helps people feel better." The boy nodded. "My sister is sick. My village is far, beyond the ridge, near the Cypress Valley. They say, you might know what to do." Hippocrates stood and walked toward him. "Come," he said. "You'll eat and rest. Then we'll go together." The boy hesitated. "But she needs—" "A tired healer heals no one," Hippocrates said with a kind smile. "Even the wind must pause between gusts." The boy, reluctant but respectful, followed him back to the healing house. There, he was given warm bread with honey, olives soaked in oil, and a place to wash. He sat beneath the myrtle tree and slept for a while, deeply, without dreams. When the sun passed its peak, they set off together. The boy's name was Nilas, and he spoke little, but walked with determination. As they crossed stone bridges and winding trails, Hippocrates listened to the birds, to the sound of sandals on dust, and most of all, to the wind. By the time they reached the village, a small cluster of homes cradled by cliffs and lavender, the air had changed. It was warmer here, and heavy with the scent of pine resin. In a shaded hut they found the girl. She was very small, no older than 7, with pale cheeks and shallow breaths. Her mother, her eyes swollen from worry, stepped aside silently. Hippocrates knelt beside the girl. He placed his hand gently over her wrist, felt her pulse, then moved to her brow, noting the heat. He opened a satchel and produced a small pouch of dried elderflower, thyme, and lemon balm. "Boil this in water," he instructed the mother, "and bathe her forehead. Then let her drink a little, just a little, every hour." He turned to Nilus. "You have done more than many ever would. You listened to love more than fear." Nilus lowered his eyes. "I didn't want to lose her." "You didn't," Hippocrates said. "You found her. That is what love does." They stayed the night in the village. The girl slept more deeply. Her breathing grew stronger. The wind outside, once uncertain, now sighed through the branches with peace. In the morning, Hippocrates sat with Nilus on a smooth stone, watching the horizon. "There is something else I will give you," the old healer said, reaching into his robe and pulling out a small woven talisman, no more than a string of threads tied around a polished pebble. "My mother made this for me when I was small. I wore it through every journey of doubt. It reminded me that even the strongest must rest, and even the wisest must wonder." He tied it gently around the boy's wrist. "I don't feel strong," Nilus whispered. "That's when you are strongest," Hippocrates replied. They left that morning as the sun rose golden across the sky. As they walked back through groves and hills, Nilus talked more. He asked about herbs, about the stars, about dreams and sadness, and why goats always look like they know a secret. Hippocrates answered each question as if it were the first he had ever heard, savoring the curiosity that only a child can carry so easily. Back in Kos, the boy stayed a few days longer, helping in the gardens, carrying water, learning how to listen to a plant's scent and a person's silence. When the time came for him to return home, he hugged Hippocrates tightly, not like a student, but like a soul who had remembered something they had once known. As the boy disappeared down the path, the wind shifted again, not urgent this time, but full, warm, and content. Hippocrates returned to his bench beneath the cypress tree and looked up at the sky. There were clouds like stretched cotton, and the faint arc of a bird gliding soundlessly. Everything was as it should be. And far off, in a quiet valley where wildflowers now grew thicker than ever before, a young girl laughed again for the first time in weeks, her voice rising into the wind. And the wind, at last, carried only joy. The days on Kos passed as they always had, not in haste, but with rhythm. Not in urgency, but in intention. Each morning arrived with dew on the fig leaves. Each evening was cicadas weaving their chorus into the darkening skies. After Nilus returned to his valley and the girl's laughter echoed once more in the wind, Hippocrates allowed himself a rare pause. There was no patient waiting, no scroll requiring translation, no wound to dress, no storm gathering on the horizon. It was one of those rare days where time widened, like the mouth of a river slipping gently into the sea. He wandered, as he often did when the world was quiet. Beyond the healing house and olive groves, there was a path rarely taken, worn by animals and shepherds more than people. It led to an old garden, forgotten by many, but never by Hippocrates. Locals called it the Garden of Forgetting. It wasn't a true garden in the cultivated sense. It had no tidy rows or fountains, no trimmed hedges or labeled herbs. Instead, it was wild. Lavender grew tangled with ivy, pomegranate trees spilled over moss-covered stones, and somewhere in the center was a cracked marble bench, cradled by honeysuckle. The story of the garden was one only the oldest remembered, and even they told it in whispers. It was said that the garden was once a place where weary minds would come to forget, not everything, but only what weighed them down. A kind of peaceful amnesia. Sorrows were left behind like worn-out shoes at the edge of a river. When Hippocrates was a young boy, his mother brought him here after the death of his younger brother. She did not speak much. She only placed a small hand upon a blue rock near the bench and said, "Let the earth hold what you can't." That day he wept into the tall grass until the sun went down. Now, decades later, his steps into the garden were slow and thoughtful. The scent of wild mint greeted him, mingled with thyme and damp bark. The air here was still, not heavy, but deep, like the silence after a meaningful conversation. He sat on the old marble bench, weathered by sun and rain. A lizard blinked lazily from a nearby rock. Bees moved among the flowers without urgency. Hippocrates closed his eyes. He allowed his mind to drift, not toward the future, nor even the present, but into the soft currents of memory. Not the sharp ones, not those wrapped in grief or regret, but the gentle ones. His mother's humming while grinding herbs, the warmth of a clay cup in his hands on winter mornings, the sound of sandals brushing through dry grass. He thought of the people he had healed, not in pride, but in gratitude, and of those he could not heal, not with herbs, nor words, nor touch. Some journeys, he had learned, were meant to continue elsewhere. The garden held his thoughts without judgment. It did not solve anything, nor try to. It merely absorbed them, like dry soil drinking water. It made space. Time softened around him. He did not sleep, not quite, but his breathing slowed until the rhythm of the trees and his own pulse matched. He stayed there, in that shared quiet with the bees and blossoms, as the sun passed its peak. Eventually, a soft rustling stirred him. A girl stood at the edge of the garden. She looked about 10 years old, barefoot, with braids that hung unevenly. Her expression was curious, not afraid. "I didn't know anyone else came here," she said. Hippocrates smiled gently. "Not many do." She stepped forward. "My grandmother said this place steals memories." He considered that. "Sometimes it helps us let go of the ones that are too heavy." "Is that the same as forgetting?" "Not always," he said. "Sometimes it's remembering differently." The girl wrinkled her nose and thought, "I come here when I miss my cat. He died last winter. I tell him stories. That is a very kind thing to do." She walked over to the blue rock and sat cross-legged beside it. "Do you think the trees remember everything we say?" "Perhaps," Hippocrates said, "but they never interrupt." She laughed quietly. They sat for a while, not speaking. The bees continued their work. The wind moved gently through the tall grass, whispering things neither of them needed to understand. After a while, the girl stood. "I have to go. My grandmother says if I don't come back before dark, The shadows get hungry. Hippocrates raised an eyebrow. Do you believe that? She grinned. No. But I think the shadows like the idea. She waved, then disappeared into the trees. Hippocrates remained a little longer. He plucked a leaf from a lemon verbena bush and held it to his nose. The scent was bright, citrusy. It reminded him of his student, Timaeus, who once made tea too strong and burned his tongue. A memory he hadn't thought of in years. It made him chuckle. Then, gently, he rose. As he walked back to his home, he noticed the wind had changed. It was cooler now, and the light was golden, that particular kind of honeyed glow that only came when the day was offering its final bow. That night, as the stars unfolded and the waves brushed against the island's shores, Hippocrates sat with his lamp low and his journal open. He didn't write much, only a few lines. Some memories do not need to be carried forever. Some are meant to be planted like seeds, so they may grow into something softer. He closed the book and placed it beside the oil lamp. Then he opened the window to let the night air in, lay down, and allowed the dark to wrap him like a warm cloak. And in the garden, unseen but still there, the blue rock waited. Not to take anything, only to hold. Quietly, patiently, like the earth always had.